Educate yourself. Start learning everything you can about the rules and regulations so that you can accurately give these lessors the information that they need to make an informed decision on that oil and gas lease. Just build up that trust with those lessors and just trying to help them through the process as best as possible, especially if they decide to do it for themselves. At the end of the day, that's usually what it's about.
Welcome to the Land Department Podcast, the state of land and energy as we see it.
Jimmy T. Hopkins, the Silver Fox, a.k.a. Leasehound numero uno.
The numero uno. I don't know about all that. We got a good team that does that, but yeah,
That's right.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
That's cool, man. Thanks for joining us, Jimmy. Little background on Jimmy. God, we've been working together 19 years, coming on 19 years now. Been at TLD for a long time. Started day one as a trainee with me back in East Texas, and hell, I was a trainee teaching a trainee, so it's not like I had all the answers by any means. But Jimmy over the years has kind of stood out as being a guy who has a knack for dealing with people, and he kind of rose to the top. Been a leasing crew chief for us on numerous projects all over the country. So we got to talking about leasing and dealing with people and landowner outreach. I said, God, we got to have Jimmy on here. He'd be perfect. He'd be great. So welcome, Jimmy.
Thank you. Yeah, I was hoping you'd ask me to do this sometime. I watch all y'all's podcasts and love it, man. They're great.
We're honored. We finally found out who that third view is. It was Jimmy.
It was Jimmy. It was like our grandmas, our moms, and Jimmy.
Yeah. That's great. Jimmy, how'd you become a landman? What made you get into it?
Well, it was something I wanted to do for a long time. I had worked in sales and other construction jobs, commercial HVAC, things like that. And I'd been trying to get into it. I had some friends that did it. And one day, a guy named Tommy Hyde, he said, I got an interview with you for Bob Lee in Nacogdoches. Be here tomorrow morning at 7:00 for breakfast. I was like, okay, I'll be there.
At the IHOP in Nac.
Yeah, at the IHOP in Nacogdoches. And so I got there at 7 a.m. and met with Bob Lee. And I'll tell you what, he called Chris Gideon Sr. and told him about me. And he said, well, if he wants to work for 2 weeks for free, see if he'll work out, then, if it all goes well, we'll put him on. And so I did. Tommy Hyde was courteous enough to let me stay in his trailer that he had, that he ran dogs out of when he found it and started living in it. 2 weeks go by, and they said, yeah, we're going to put you on. We think you're going to do okay at this. And so that day I told Tommy, thank you for the hospitality, and went and put a hotel room on my credit card.
Yeah. And in all honesty, we just felt bad for the guy. We like, hell, if he can survive Tommy's camper for 2 weeks, this sucker can buy a lease at least. Yeah.
Oh man, I woke up in my car 1 or 2 mornings of that 2 weeks.
Oh my God. Yeah.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, it's good times. And back then when Jimmy started with us, this was kind of the shale days, and leasing agents and leasing landmen were kind of, it was the beginning when we kind of started seeing people get into specialties, right? You had title people and you had leasing people, and just because it was a volume thing, right? Kind of up to that point, the oil and gas industry was, you're a landman, you do it all. And that's great. And nowadays we've kind of gotten back to that where everybody can do everything. But at the time, I mean, you had 2 types of people that would show up to interview, that wanted to get in the business. Some that you could look at and say, okay, well, after a conversation, you're going to be a title person. And then the other ones are like Jimmy's like, okay, you're going to negotiate leases. And really that's kind of how it started, and how Jimmy got so much experience. He can hold a conversation. Obviously, he's very personable and hardworking and shows up on time and all those things. And, he's made a career out of it, and out of really just being the best lease buyer, or being a very accomplished lease buyer. And then obviously his skill set evolved to be able to be a leader of buyers and, be a work with clients and manage teams and organize data. He does so much more now than just negotiate leases. But we're kind of in that season again in the land community, right? We went years where if you could negotiate leases, you had work. But then, the last 5 or 6 years, it's kind of got away from that. I mean, there's not as much leasing work today as there was 15 years ago, right? But as we start seeing some more of this alternative energy pickup, the renewable space, all these other kind of new energy projects that are coming out, we found ourselves over the last year or so really having to recruit and hire and cross-train people to be acquisition folks, to negotiate agreements with landowners. And so we felt today like Jimmy would be a great resource to just walk through the basics, right? How do you, the landowner outreach, how do you establish trust? How do you represent your client's best interest, but also, represent the landowner and the mineral owner's best interest as well, and try to play that middle ground. So, Jim, we thought we could talk about that today with you. And I know you got a lot to share.
Oh yeah. Starting, I guess, early on with leasing, it took me a long time to kind of perfect what worked best. And in today's world, I guess, really what I would say is you're trying to break down that wall of the lessor, because they just don't trust landmen right off the bat. You call them and they're, well, yeah, I don't know, hang up on you. They might tell you, call me back in 2 weeks, or I'll call you in 2 weeks, which they never do. So
no, I'm not selling my minerals.
Yeah, I'm not selling them. That's a big thing with the mineral buying has really gotten big since the early days back in 2005, 2006. And people are just scared to death of it, really. I guess they've heard the horror stories, they've read the articles in the newspaper. And now with the internet being in everybody's house, they just, type it up and Google it and see what's going on. And every article is, don't immediately sign. Don't rush out and do this. Don't do this and do that, do this. And it's a lot for a landowner, and I always just kind of think that, man, that's got to be overwhelming for you, because 18 years in the business, I don't know it all by far. I rely on our teams for so much of the experience and so much of their specialty, like Brent was saying, that it's just, it's overwhelming for them. So really approaching a landowner from my point of view, what I'd like to do is when I get a list of names or whatever, I like to immediately sit down and write out handwritten envelope with their name, their address, not pre-printed or any of that stuff. Put a nice letter in there, and in real big red, this is not to buy your minerals, real big red, because that's immediately what they think. They'll just water it up and throw it in the trash. Well, about probably, I'd say 50 or 60% of the time, you'll get a call back or an email from that lessor that you have sent that letter to. Or if not, in the meantime, you're reaching out and calling them, and you've sent letters to every address that you can find for them. And they probably found your letter and oh yeah, Jimmy Hopkins, yeah, I got your letter. So right off the bat, they know what I'm calling about. And that seems to help some, and then after that, it's just a matter of treating those people like you want to be treated, being humble about it. Don't go in there as a know-it-all, gain their trust, really, because you have a goal to achieve. Just like anything, you got your job, you got to make it happen. And that goal, it has to fit within the confines of what your client has laid out for you. And trying to find that middle ground is what can sometimes be challenging. Sometimes it's not so bad, especially if we've done our due diligence on the front end and we know what the going rate is in the area for oil and gas leases for the years and so forth. It's, it can be pretty close on when you get to royalty and money. Sometimes it's way different, a huge spread, and sometimes it's not. If it's not, and they want to go seek an attorney, which a lot of people do these days, they've been down this road. They've been hurt. They've been taken advantage of by the unscrupulous landman out there. And there are some still. Even in today's age, there's still unscrupulous landman. Imagine that. But for the most part, the AAPL has kind of changed that. And that's been a real good thing. Yeah, we now have to, have our code of conduct that's in line with theirs, or else they can take your license and then you don't get to go to work for a company such as Dudley. And why you'd want to work anywhere else, I don't know.
Tell me about it, Jimmy. Tell me more, son.
But it's the only company I've ever worked for. So I don't know what other companies are like, but I don't ever want to work for anybody else. I love it here. Just build up that trust though with those lessors and, just trying to help them through the process as best as possible, especially if they decide to do it themselves. You can give them pointers and what the client's going to let you do. And for the most part, all clients are going to be very reasonable when it comes to protecting mineral rights or protecting the environment or, any of that, things of that nature. I guess really at that point, it's just a matter of getting your wording right. It's a matter of coming to terms with the wording of the lease and the contract, and that scares a lot of people, especially if they don't take it to an attorney and they don't really know how to read it, and where they can understand it in a way that's, not just overwhelming for them. Yeah. Sometimes it's overwhelming for me, some of these contracts that they send back. I'm like, where are they coming with that stuff? Holy moly.
How do you navigate that, Jimmy? I mean, that's when it's the basic thing on an existing project that's been going and everybody knows who Jimmy Hopkins is when he calls. How do you navigate the challenges, right? When you get something back, when you're like, wow, okay, this is not even marketable, right? My client can't operate under these terms. Like, how do you get people off of some of the more difficult things that if they're not informed or haven't done this before and they're just going off of what their attorney said, and maybe their attorney isn't qualified, right? To be doing this.
We see that a lot.
See that a lot. How do you bridge that? What have you found over the years that worked?
You just try to explain it to them in the easiest way possible. And sometimes that's actually printing up stuff off the internet, literally just going on the internet and printing rules and regulations to show them that what they're trying to accomplish with the lease form that their attorney is given them, especially attorneys that are not versed in oil and gas, is that you're putting me in a real bad spot because you're trying to do something here that my client's not going to allow us to do. And the reason why is because you're making this lease non-drillable, and here are these reasons why. And let me show you exactly, I can break it down each one for you, why that's not going to work, why it's not a drillable lease. But by the changing this few words here or there, or removing this sentence, that'll take that issue away. And we can all live with this agreement here, be happy with it. And if you're happy with it, we're happy with it. It's a good deal. And at the end of the day, that's usually what it's about, is putting together a deal that everybody's happy with. And, I hear people get mad, lessors get mad if, their neighbor down the road 6 months later gets paid more. And, and we're in these areas where we see these lessors, from time to time at Walmart or Brookshire's or wherever we're shopping. And you don't want those people being angry at you. So you really have to walk that line of, I want to make sure that you feel good about the deal you're signing, whether it's for 5 years or 10 years or 3 years. And hopefully it's for much longer than that because it's held by production, and you're getting those nice royalty checks and that mailbox money. That's what makes it worthwhile. And try to get back to, that's another thing that you're working through with those provisions that you're having to explain to them and so forth. You don't want them to lose sight of mailbox money, and what a nice reward that is for not only them, but in some states like Texas, forever, your generations to come in your family, if you have those minerals. That's kind of how I approach it. I know everybody has their different methods to the madness, but mine is basically education. And whether that's just going on Google and printing stuff out and taking it to them by hand, or emailing it to them, or trying to explain it to them over the phone,
or having a memo from your client, a good explanation. I've got stuff squirreled away of like great explanations of some circumstance, that would just really articulated the why. Okay, this is why I cannot give you a cost-free royalty on this, this gas lease, right? On this oil and gas lease that's for a natural gas play. Like, this changes our economics, and this is what it takes to drill a productive and profitable oil and gas well. And so educating, the why is important, and having those resources and good explanations are critical if you can hold on to them and pull them out at the right time. Jimmy, you kind of hit a good point as, you have your way of doing it, and other people who primarily negotiate oil and gas leases for us or buyers for us, they've got different strategies. Everybody has a little different strategy. I think the biggest thing to take away, the most successful ones over the years have been the guys that realize that they're going to be around, right? I'm not just here to swoop in, do something and leave, and I don't have to live with the consequences, right? That's why so often the local lease buyer is the better lease buyer at times,
Right.
because they're living there. They have to deal with the consequences. So they're not going to fly by night. They're not going to do something shady. They're going to have the best interest of not only their client, but the local population, the people they're dealing with. They've got to live with that. So they're going to be honest. They're going to give full explanations. And oftentimes people think that they have to hold back information. When you're negotiating a deal, you really don't. You want the person across the table from you to have trust.
Absolutely.
And if you can establish that trust, be open and honest, give them real answers. Why I can't give you $600 an acre is because, the market is the market. It's supply and demand. I can't just randomly give you $600 an acre when I'm getting everybody else $300. Just the way it is. There's a corner lot costs more than something that's landlocked of 600 feet off the road. It's just the nature of things. And why I can't give you a higher royalty? Well, because oil and gas wells have to be profitable, and these are the reasons. And this give them an explanation of that. And if you're honest with folks, you can go a long way. And frankly, especially when you get in these bigger projects, Jimmy, you've seen this time and time again, is establishing that rapport early on in your project is critical, because you're typically going to be dealing with the largest landowners first, right? Or mineral owners. And you can't screw that up. You want to cause yourself some problems, go piss off the bell cow or the big guy, or the big guy, big girl. I mean, you can't live like that. And so, I mean, Jimmy, you've done it time and again. You've seen the importance of that, really establishing a rapport early on with
Absolutely.
the big G.
It's the most important thing probably. And once you do, and they're gone, you're not getting them back. You can switch buyers. You can try that route, and sometimes it works, but sometimes it doesn't. They're like, I'm not doing business with your company or your client ever again. And we've seen that happen, not to us necessarily, but other companies. And
I mean, it happens.
They lease to us.
It happens.
Then,
I mean, you can't avoid it. And sometimes, people just rub other people the wrong way. Maybe they don't like bald folks, whatever. Maybe their drunk uncle was bald and they just don't like you or whatever. But it's, I think one of the things that Jimmy's always been really good about when, we have maybe a younger landman or someone who we've got leasing for the first time is really hitting home that more so than anything they've ever done prior to negotiating an agreement on behalf of their client, they are a representation of our client. Like they are connected forever with X company, right? They represent them. And I think you have to be aware of that and take it very seriously,
yes,
because it's you're the face, right? And you're the representation. You screw that up, it's not going to be good. You're going to send somebody else in to try to, do damage repair or damage control. And nobody wants to do that. We don't have time for that. So Jimmy's always done a pretty good job with that. Maybe that's a good transition, Jimmy, like for a new lease buyer, somebody who's maybe been a landman for a little bit and they get on a project, or maybe they get on a renewables job or get on some leasing project, and now they're being asked to negotiate agreements. Like, what are some of the things, like basic toolkit that they need? We talked about how you treat people and things like that, but what should they expect to do? What should they be striving to do to be proactive about? What tools do they need? Stuff like that. What are some helpful things for a new landman?
Rule number 1, stay out of the bar. That's where your competition is. Seriously.
Rule number 2, don't be an asshole. Also,
don't be an asshole. Stay out of the bar. But no, for real. Education. Educate yourself. Absolutely 100%. Start learning everything you can about the rules and regulations so that you can accurately give these lessors the information that they need to make an informed decision on that oil and gas lease. And, don't be a bullshit artist. That's managers' jobs to identify those guys and not let them go out. Those new guys coming in, I would just say, put in the time, man. Just, don't work the 6-8 hour days that, your buddy's working over there. Stay in afterwards, come back home early, do whatever you got to do, and read, just keep pushing to learn as much about the industry as you can, especially in that area. Do you have special field rules? What do you need to know? Being well versed in how to talk to people, if that's a problem for you, then, practicing that daily. Get up and practice in the mirror if you need to. Prepare before you go out to talk to a lessor, like hours ahead of time. Start figuring out what you're going to tell them. What the conversation, how are you going to lead this conversation? How are you going to break down that wall that they have? I mean, we've dealt with lessors before. I'll never forget when we had a buyer. Well, he was a title guy that was going to get into leasing. And you remember Levi. And he had assigned him to this lady out in St. Augustine County. And she had like 180 acres and she just would not talk to him, wouldn't even say a word. And one day, and he kept going out there. He dropped off gift cards, took her a turkey, all kinds of stuff. And one day I said, I'll go out there with you, Levi. We'll see what's happening. And we get out there and we pull up, and sure enough, there she is on the front porch. No, get out here. I want to talk to you. We're both out of the truck, kind of walking that way. She's like, just get off my property. And I'm like, oh, yes, ma'am. No problem. Hey, I noticed you got a whole shed there full of aluminum cans. What's the price of aluminum these days? She just started talking. Come to find out, the reason why she wasn't talking is she was still under lease. Levi did his due diligence on that one. It wasn't his fault necessarily. He was recorded in a different county. This track was on the county line, so it was recorded in the wrong county. And so she was scared. She was literally frightened that if she started talking to another landman, that she would get in trouble,
or she would lose her lease
that she was under lease with. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but it was just a matter of breaking down that wall enough to get her to open up to say, I think I'm under lease and I shouldn't be talking to y'all, and I don't want to get in trouble for this. And I mean, there's no telling how many hours he put in trying to get that lady to speak to him, and money. I mean, he literally was taking her gift cards and stuff, and she just wouldn't ever say a word to him. So you've got to overcome that kind of stuff. And, for some people that kind of comes natural, and others you have to work at it. I know a lot of people that have to work at it, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. You just have to practice. And like I say, get in front of that mirror. Talk to your spouse, to your friends. And just like, can I borrow you for a second? I want to go over something with you. What do you think this sounds like? Sit down and just prepare a statement.
It's not a natural thing. I talk for a living for the last 20 years, talk to people I don't want to talk to, but
right.
I mean, early on, it was intimidating. What do you say? How do you start the conversation? How do you say no? Like, how do you say, I don't know? It's like, how are you going to navigate the unexpected, right? Because it's a conversation. Jimmy made a great point about educating yourself. Read the lease. Read front to back the lease. Number one. I mean, and listen, an oil and gas lease is full of a bunch of stuff that doesn't make sense, to the layman, to someone who doesn't live in that space. And even more so, we've got a lot of really seasoned agents, landmen out there now, people with 10, 15, 20 years experience now that are working in new sectors, right? They're negotiating a solar lease or a battery storage agreement or a wind lease, or folks all over the South are doing lithium leases. Well, that's an entirely different form, right? CCS, carbon injection leases. Those are entirely different forms. They're entirely different conditions. Economic factors, the consideration associated with it. All those things are different. They're similar in ways, but they're different. And your responsibility is to educate and inform the landowner or the mineral owner. And you got to get versed. Even though you may know everything about something, you got to stop and read the lease, ask questions. One of the best things that helped me early on was I was working with Steve Bryson on a project in East Texas for EOG. And I thought I was pretty damn good by that point. I had 5 years, of doing this. I knew it, right? I've been dealing with, the sweet little ladies that fry me soft shell crabs and bake me a pie, and I drink coffee, and I was, I could get it done. It was great. But I ran into one of these guys up in Longview that was a damn, oil and gas driller, right? He had a small E&P, second generation guy, and he chewed me up and spit me out. Like I went back with my tail tucked, and I was doing a job for Steve, and thank goodness Steve and Dudley were really good friends. He didn't fire my ass. I went to him and said, "Look, man, I can't get this guy. He's asking questions I don't have answers to. He's saying things I've never heard." And I just kind of shook my head. And he said, "Well, let's go." So we went and sat down with him, and I listened to him, Steve, and this mineral owner. I can't remember his name for the life of me, but I remember the conversation. I remember his desk, his office, everything. They commenced to show me over the next 45 minutes how little I knew about this business. And I mean, I walked out of that meeting. And I talked to Steve about it. Steve works with us today, Dudley. I said, "Man, I remember that time you just reminded me that I was a damn fool and how little I knew from that conversation." But if you can get that opportunity to sit in and listen to those negotiations, it's invaluable. So if you're a young guy on a crew, ask your crew chief, your leasing crew chief, that they're negotiating a big deal. "Hey, can I sit in and listen?" Be vocal about those things. Now, so much we do stuff on Teams, we can very easily jump on a call with someone, jump on a phone call and say, "Hey, I've got Brent here. He's one of our new landmen. He's sitting in and listening in, trying to learn some things about XYZ. Do you mind if he listens in?" Nobody's going to mind that. And your crew chief or your leader or the senior buyer on your team is not going to mind that, because hell, somebody had to teach them. But be vocal about that. Be vocal about listening in, because you're going to absorb so much when you can actually have the time to separate yourself and listen, as opposed to having to carry a conversation and be engaged in, like, what am I going to say next? How am I going to respond to this or that? We always encourage that. Jimmy's always been really good about, that kind of part of it, with teaching folks and showing them the ways, the Jimmy ways.
I had a good teacher.
Yeah, shit. I was a little more intense back then, Jimmy. They call me Bruiser for a reason. I'm a little softer today than I was then, but
Jimmy,
we figured it out together.
Jimmy, things are different now a little bit than maybe when you started. A lot of remote work happening. I know you're working on a remote project right now. What are the differences for a negotiation process when you're dealing with remote projects versus when you're able to go and knock on the door?
Well, I'd say the biggest thing is, especially with the older mineral owners, okay, that still live on the property where the minerals are, so forth. Some of those guys really like to have, somebody knocking on the door. And although I may be remote, we do have the ability to have people going out and knocking on those doors. And that's very important, especially in certain areas. Now you do come into plays where, like in Shelby County, for example, a lot of the people don't live out there. They live in Dallas or Houston or in Shreveport, or Lafayette. They live somewhere other than the Piney Woods. And those guys are, they're kind of used to that. People that don't live on the tracks anymore have become accustomed to it over the years, I guess. And technology has made that wonderful. Back when I started, this was it was a much different time. You still went to the courthouse. You still went to the graveyards looking for people, or you went to the college to use their Ancestry account. Go put an SFA to use Ancestry. Now I just set at my computer and dig into it. Having the ability to email everything back and forth is super important for these people. And most people do have email. You still run across those that don't, but most people do. And that has really helped a lot. And it has allowed more of this remote work. Now you get areas like we're dealing with in the Northeast right now that's still remote areas, and a lot of people live there. You can't get away from having somebody on the ground knocking on doors. Even in the smallest of tracts to the largest of tracts, you still have to have somebody out there knocking on doors because they're not going to answer your phone call. In fact, so many calls today, when you make them, they go straight to voicemail because their phone's not even ringing. It's an unknown number. So it goes straight to voicemail. And then if they listen to their voicemail, then they might hear it. Most people don't listen to their voicemails, from my experience with it anymore, because you don't get a call back. That's when you start hammering them with letters and sending a FedEx to them, getting them to sign for something. So, if you got the right address. I mean, it's, a lot of different approaches to that. But for those people that don't live on tracks, it's very easy. For those that do, that are older, it's not as easy. You still got to have boots on the ground. Still have to have that.
Jimmy, you mentioned Ancestry. What are some of the, we talked about studying your lease, being informed. What are some of the other just easy wins, things that a leasing, if you're going to get into a leasing project, what accounts do you need to have? What helps? Or some of the tools for finding people? And you don't have to give away the secret sauce if you got any sneaky Jimmy secrets. But
honestly, Ancestry is probably my favorite tool. I mean, I use that more than anything. Now, it's not real good for current contact information, although it does have that resource there. It's not the best for that. But what it is, that's your people finder, basically. If I can't get in touch with somebody, I'm turning to Ancestry, Google. I mean, everything I can imagine. If I know they're in a certain area, I go to in the Northeast, it'd be called the auditor site, here, the tax assessor sites. Start putting in their name, see what you can find. You would be amazed what Google holds. Just Googling somebody's name and the town that their last address was in, you never know what you're going to find. I mean, on a current project, we had a guy that was, he just wouldn't lease. It's like, how can you not lease that? Well, I was doing some digging not long ago, and I found out that, he's out there and he's just really against oil and gas leasing. And there's articles after articles in papers about it. I mean, he's just one of those guys that does not like it. And that's okay. That's up to you. If that's your choice, that's your minerals. You get to do what you want with them. But
that information's critical, because you have to convey that to your client. Why can't we get this lease? Well, here's 6 articles, where he bashed the industry that you're in. So don't know what to tell you. It is what it is. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you could try all different kinds of things, but once you find that information, whether it's that or, a different article about something else, at least you can kind of change your approach to address that way. It goes back to the education of things, and you just really want to learn all you can about the area, the people that you're leasing, and what the common issues are. Have there been problems in the past with leasing out there? Did the operators in the past have issues with their well sites? Were there environmental problems, things of that nature? And if you can address those right out of the box, it makes a difference in the long run. To me, that's kind of one of the best ways to do it. And then changing your buyer. If you got a guy that's just shutting this buyer down, you put another buyer on it immediately and try that. And if that doesn't work, put another buyer on it immediately. If that doesn't work, you might have to go yourself.
Yeah. That's that, your experience has evolved and your role has evolved, with Nothing Land over the years. But, you kind of hit on something that's important if you're running a leasing job. Like if you're the crew chief, a leasing job, or you're managing an acquisition project for a client, you need good data and you need as up-to-date information about your negotiations as possible. So whatever you're doing, there's at a minimum, you need to be requiring your team to have updated contact notes every day. You need a means to, be able to see that, to track that, to report it, to monitor it. That's the responsibility of a crew chief or, an acquisition lead on a big job. They need that information. So if you're a buyer on a project, you should expect, the standards for you to enter your contacts every day, update information in whatever database you're working in. Talking about tools, you need to be able to computer literate. You need to be able to work in all the Word documents. You need to understand databases. You need to be able to do those things if you want to continue to be employable and stay active.
Absolutely.
You don't want to be the guy who's, is going to have somebody else fill out their forms for him. You want to be low maintenance on the job. You want to be able to fill out your own leases, build your own lease purchase reports if required of you on the project, and do those things. So, not only are you studying your lease, you're subscribed to the sites that allow you to find people. Yeah, you're also tech literate. You're also Johnny on the spot with your notes. It's a habit, right? You're entering your contact notes is a habit. It shouldn't be something you're forced to do. You should be doing it as you do it. You got to build that into your routine because information is critical.
It's super important, even for yourself. Going back to that lessor, you've got to have a record of what y'all discussed in the past, what those issues are that they brought to your attention. And if you're not listening to them and finding out their concerns and then jotting that down, putting that in those contact notes, then you're not doing your job. And it's just super important to be successful at this. Ancestry is a good tool, but being able to sit down and accurately describe all the information that's needed is just as important as that tool is. It's to me one of the most important things, and then they're being able to, and that goes on further even to being able to give the client the information that they need. And you need to be held accountable for not doing that as well, because it just creates a big issue down the road. If I don't know what's been going on with the track, then that's a problem.
Well, at least if you don't have, the last thing you want is your crew chief or your project manager to have to eat shit, because you didn't, take care of your business and right. Provide them with enough information to explain why we haven't got this lease or why we can't get this timely or why it took so long. You have that situation, it rolls downhill, right?
It does.
But, in some states, Arkansas, for example, when you have integration hearings, forced pooling and things like that, you have to show a resume of efforts, right? You have to show, I contact this person, I offered them a lease on this date. These were the terms of that offer, so on and so forth. You have to be able to show that. And if you aren't keeping good records, well, then you cause problem on down the line. So, that's the big thing. You do not want to be a pain point. If you're talking about longevity, staying busy, right. Staying working as a field landman, those things are critical.
Have that mindset that, and this is what I've always tried to do, not just for example, but for the client as well. Y'all have other things to do. Y'all have asked us to do this. This is the assignment that we have been given. And I don't want to lean on you for anything if I don't have to. And I mean, it has to be an emergency. You have a job to do. Do it to the best of your ability and try not to interrupt your superiors or management or something like that over small details. They're busy. They got a lot to do. Try to handle everything you can on your own and let those guys do their job. That way you stay working. I wouldn't have my job without Brent doing his job. And so I've always told Brent, hey, man, my job is to not bother you. So, this is taken care of.
Yeah.
You go do your job. This will be fine over here. I've got this.
Yeah.
You go do your job. This will be fine.
Yeah. The client's the same way. Client's hiring you to take care of something.
And same with the client.
They're hiring Dudley Man or XYZ broker to do the job, and they need to produce results and show their work. And ultimately that's what we're there to do and be a steward between the mineral owner and the operator. I mean, that's kind of the role you have to take. And if you put that hat on and have that mentality, you stay busy, maybe 18 or 19 years. And Jimmy.
Yeah. That and look at it like it's your own money.
That's, yeah.
try to protect that land cost. That's
Yeah.
that's super important. But keeping those guys where all they have to do is pick up the phone and say, "Hey, what about this?" And you've got the answer for them immediately. Let's roll. That's it. They have no other worries, on our end of things for sure.
Yeah,
That's
for
the
sure.
goal.
Well, Jimmy, thanks, man. It's we could go on for a long time talking about this, and I think certainly we will. We'll pick this up again and dive into some other nuances. But I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Awesome. Hey, I appreciate
Thanks,
y'all.
Jimmy.
Thank y'all. Y'all have a nice day.
You too.
Thanks for listening to The Land Department. Check out our website in the show notes or visit dudley-land.com to learn more about us.